That's popped it on my computer.
Hello and welcome to the 7th episode of Conversations with Kids in Cyber, where we have monthly meetings to discuss with professionals what's happening in the world of cyber and children. Today we are meeting with Catherine Knibbs. Congratulations on your award, the Cyber Awards. That's
Thank you.
very exciting for cyber awareness. Would you like to introduce yourself, Catherine, and a bit about yourself?
Okay, yep. So I wear many hats, so I'm going to keep it really simple. I am a consultant child and adult trauma psychotherapist. I am the CEO and founder of Children and Tech, my website and training organization. I am a clinician. I'm a mum. I am a researcher. I've just finished my PhD and I'm an author of 7 books on what we do online and why we do it and the kind of pickles we can get into.
That's amazing. So one of the things that I was keen to touch on was about cyber trauma.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate a bit about what that is, what that means?
Yep. So in the last 15 years or so, I've been working with primarily children. I do work with adults as well. And what I noticed was in 2010, my children were exposed to, not in school, not at home, but in between. Okay. So this is, we'll get into why banning phones doesn't work, why social media is such an interesting space. But in 2010, my children were in secondary school. They were exposed to a really graphic, horrific video that was trending at the time. I'm not going to name it, but it is certainly, the early internet users will be quite aware of this particular film. And from that point, I realized that actually you can be traumatized by media in the same way that you can be by real world events because of the way that we hold devices. And essentially, cyber trauma is any trauma that occurs with, through, or from an internet ready device. And that can be driven by humans and let's call them AI bots, for example. So we do not need to be sharing things with each other. We can actually be traumatized by interactions and content in terms of media and what we interact with. Now, trauma is a word that currently is a little bit overused. It would seem that in today's world, in 2025, all over social media, everybody's a trauma expert, and trauma is a particular issue. It's not being upset. It's not being a little bit sad. It's an actual physiological and psychological impact. So when I discuss cyber trauma, I'm talking about a real clinical issue, not necessarily something that's less, if that makes sense. Because, you know, we do live in a world where therapy language is very common online.
Yeah. How would you say that would manifest in a child? So we know if our child has suffered a trauma in the environment, we know that. But if they have suffered a trauma online that a parent wouldn't be aware of, how would that present in a child where a parent might think, "Do you know, something is not right here, something's going on?"
So, I mean, to be perfectly honest, this is one of the findings from my PhD study, is parents certainly need to understand what trauma is and how you recognize it, how it manifests. And many things can happen with trauma. Often it's a physiological response through the nervous system. So I might be saying to parents, your child might now have sleep issues. They might be wet in the bed. They might seem agitated, panicky. They might also withdraw and become very quiet. They might avoid technology. There's lots and lots of physical symptoms. And if we go back to, not so long ago, there was a really, really traumatic video being shared around social media, and it was of Charlie Kirk, and that resulted in lots and lots of children seeing that particular video. And what I'm suggesting to a lot of parents is, Children might tell you they're not bothered. And this is one of the things that crops up in certainly in child development and child psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
People might not notice behavior changes in their children because they are subtle. Children are really good at keeping their responses close, or they might fall apart, is often what some parents will say in the therapy office is, they're just completely changed. What I would certainly say is, as a parent, you feel it, you feel it, you start to notice changes, generally in behavior, generally in mood. That doesn't necessarily mean that just because a child has a mood change, for example, and they're a bit more grumpy lately, that it is cyber trauma. It could actually be that they've been staying up a little bit late. So again, it's monitoring what's taking place. And the only way we can find out if there is a traumatic response is by really doing a bit of an assessment around what changed, when it changed, and having conversations about it. And a point to note, not asking specifically about the event. So another finding that's coming out of my PhD research is we have to stop asking children about what they see online, because we are re-traumatizing them.
Yeah, it's like asking them to relive the moment that
Yeah.
happens. But I suppose that's a hard one for parents, isn't it? Because they want to know, like, what did you see? Because they feel like if they know the nature of what it was, then they can somehow fix it. So I think that's maybe
Yeah.
like a delicate balance to think if it was maybe sexual in nature, there's maybe a way around that conversation. If it was violent in nature, so I suppose parents want to know what did you see? I
Yeah,
suppose
and
maybe
it's
asking the child the context and maybe
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
the actual what
Yes.
happened in the video, maybe just asking like what nature was this video. Then parents can, I suppose, get some sort of idea
Y
themselves.
Yeah, and to be honest, I saw this when I worked a lot with the Manchester Arena victims. There was a lot of questions from people. What did you see? How did it happen? And that's not conducive to helping somebody heal, recover, or manage what's taken place. And unfortunately, not all therapists are trained in this, so certainly parents won't be. Um, but we do want to know. I mean, that's part of our morbid curiosity. It's part of our want to understand our child. And sometimes I see this, particularly in the online space, is if we know what our child saw, we then have the power to change how they feel. And that isn't how we support children. We don't necessarily need to know exactly what it was they saw. We need to know how our children are responding and reacting to two very different things.
Yeah. I think the biggest issue at the moment I see facing parents and everyone really is we have this idea where when I spoke to Dean Burnett, he said that social media isn't inherently bad. Like it has done some
Yeah.
really good things for children. People have found their voice, they've found their spaces. People that's been part of the LGBTQ community have found a space where they feel
Yeah.
like they can express themselves. But then also on the other side of things, we can't stop them from seeing things like you described your own children seeing. We don't know what the next video is going to be on social media. We don't know what's going to be sent. So there's this fear of parents that yes, we
Yeah.
do want to allow them to have the freedom and explore social media, but we can't stop them from seeing the content that's out there. And I think this is the push pull with parents. Some are saying you're not going on social media, and some are letting them on it, and then you're
Yeah.
having kids with cyber trauma. I don't know where the fix is in that, and I think this is why Australia's been like, nope, we're banning it. Uh,
Well, would you let's just go through really where we're sitting. Okay, I'm going to say something that might be considered controversial. It's not about smartphones, it's not about social media. We become fixated on the typology or the name. We haven't even defined what we mean by social media, right? And where Australia is at the moment is they've decided to name a set of platforms, right? A set of
mhm,
applications. What social media is is in the title because a lot of it is about socializing and communicating. But let me just go back to 2010. The way in which my children were exposed to that kind of material was not on social media. It didn't exist in the way that it did then. It was on the screen of a phone. Funnily enough, the one that certain large names in this space talk about, flip phones. Flip phones had screens. My children were shown a video on a flip phone screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we start to look at what we mean by smart device, smartphone, social media, gaming, you have to start getting into the typologies, okay? And this is where the entire landscape is a mess. We have different types of issues that arise. So if I talk about cyber trauma, that's the effect of an online harm. There are currently, I think I've got, as she says, looking at a board, about 60 plus different types of online harm. What we're doing at the moment is we're kind of demonizing one particular sentence, one particular idea or a construct, and we're trying to remove that construct in the hope that we will resolve the problem. The problem isn't social media. The problem isn't a smartphone. The internet is full of people. It's also full of large language models, computer programs, algorithms, all the different things that interact together, a little bit like weather. Okay, so if we try to ban rain, we then have to imagine, well, what would we do if it was a windy day? Would we still go out? Would rain be as dangerous as the wind? And sadly, what we've done is we've super focused over the last 20 years on these concepts without necessarily understanding child development, without necessarily understanding the age and stage and what a child is doing in and on those spaces. So even if we ban smartphones, even if we ban social media, and what we're trying to do is define what that means, the internet still exists. URLs are website addresses, and you can text and click on website addresses. So we're not going to prevent interactions with all of those spaces online because we're trying to get rid of a very, very small cohort of what we think is the issue, in air quotes. And this is one of the biggest things, Megan, right? Is as I see social media being banned, if you like, so it's being delayed until children are 16. Well, what about if they go onto some of these chat forums? What about if they're in some of these gaming environments? Because the dangers of people still exist in those environments.
I was speaking to someone yesterday and they were like, oh, that's social media ban in Australia. Yay, it's great. And I'm like, I disagree. And they're like, how can you be like the founder of Kids in Cyber and disagree with a ban on social media and disagree with a ban on smartphones? And I'm like, 'cause it doesn't really solve the problem. I remember even at a very young age when MSN was first a thing and there was big desktop computers in the bedroom. And my dad was working, he was a network engineer, and he used to come in and he would mess about my computer and it would just shut down. There would be like it would be locked. They would put a timer on it somehow, and he would leave, and I would be like, "Right, how do I get round this?" I think I spent like 2 hours getting around how to get back onto this chat, and then I sussed it out. And when he shut the computer down at night, he was safe in his head that okay, I've shut that down. I'm going to my bed. I went on and I could find a way around about it, and I've sat speaking to my friends all night. And I said to that person, I was like, "Look, social media, saying banning Facebook and everything is." There's still YouTube, there's still Discord, there's still so many other platforms that they'll just move over to that you'll not solve the problem. There's still, like you said, there's still lots of dangerous content out there. You can't stop it. And I think it seems to be this big governmental look, we've took action. It just pacifies the people to think, right, okay, our government's doing something, it's a whole movement, we're behind it. And there's so many, and one of my biggest concerns also was what happens when your child finds a way around this ban, gets online, is groomed, gets into trouble, sends pictures, ends up being sextorted, and then the adult turns it on them and says, well, you can't tell because you shouldn't be here. I thought you were 16. and then that puts the blame on the victim, who's not going to speak to a parent, not going to speak that out, because they're going to think, oh, that's my fault, I shouldn't have been on here. I think that's a very scary outcome of
yeah, I would certainly say at the moment, and again, this is going to be a provocative statement, perpetrators at the moment are clapping their hands in glee, because what is going to happen now, and when this becomes enforced in bigger environments, when we start to say, okay, let's ban this, let's remove this, let's delay this, what's going to happen is children have a natural curiosity. We know that. It's in all the child development theories, and we know in terms of child age and stage, part of that growing up process is to rebel, is to find ways in which they can risk take. And if we make those risk taking processes take place in sheltered, hidden environments, then we are exposing children to many more risks. And where we're at the moment is, for example, in Australia, there's going to be, let me tell you, there's going to be a lot of families who disagree with what the Australian government have done, and they're going to create accounts for their children. And those accounts are now going to suggest that those children are 16. And that's going to put those children into such a risky space that actually we're now talking about perpetrators having more in their favor than the victims would do. Now, I have worked with victims for over 15 years in this space. What I do know is the biggest risk to children is not being able to communicate that they're having a problem with something online. And that is why I say it's never been about technology. My work is not about the technology. It's about children and child development. It's about understanding their behavior, their ages, their stages, processes in which they might take risks, such as neurodevelopmental issues, mental health issues, attachment issues, what's really going on behind, and then how that works with the adults around them. And if we say, we're not talking to you, we're not going to show you how to navigate this space until you reach an age for which there's no evidence what 16 actually conveys and why we've picked 16, the same as the idea of GDPR data protection at 13, there is no, well, there is actually, there's Gillett competency and Fraser competency, but that's slightly different. What we're actually looking at is 16 is an age at which within the United Kingdom, a young person can go out and have sex, but they can't vote. But
can't
at
drink,
16,
can't go to a bar, but they can,
we would invite them into a space where they might not recognize tricky people, tricky situations, because they haven't had a graduated exposure. Now, the issue we have faced is parents did not know about this environment. I call it a digital city park and a shopping centre, okay? They're two ways of describing this place. What we did was we all moved into the digital city park, the parents, and we allowed our children to come into that environment without recognizing who the dangerous people were or where the dangerous environments were. And this is why I spend a lot of time really providing, the content all over social media to say, understand the game, understand the environment, understand the people that are frequenting there. Not everybody online is bad. Not everybody online is good. But being able to assess who is there, what they're doing, how they communicate, the signs and symptoms to look out for, and how children can communicate they're in trouble, they're having difficulties, they're finding things that little bit tricky. And what we are doing is creating a narrative that, it's down to the victims. You shouldn't have been on that website. You shouldn't have been doing that thing in the first place. And sadly, the tech companies, and I'm not giving them a get out of jail card here, but when they first created these environments, going back to MSN, they were not created for children.
No.
And what we did was we allowed children into those spaces without the correct safeguards. And now we're trying to work backwards. And it's really difficult, because what we've done is create a space where we're saying, okay, you're now in trouble and being punished. And children who feel punished generally then go into a rebellious thinking. Well, I'm going to find a way to do it anyway. I'm really concerned about the way in which we've addressed this, because in the research evidence, we're not talking huge correlations. We're going back to the kind of thinking that we did for trepanning, where we used to drill holes in people's heads for mental health issues, because the evidence said, well, it seemed like a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, both. I studied cybersecurity at university. My husband's a cybersecurity consultant. Our children are like, we're more aware. So that's one of the reasons why I created Kids in Cyber, because when I looked at cyber education for children, there was none. It was all aimed at wait till they get to the academy. And I'm like, but the babies are sitting in prams with tablets and phones and my like I know some parents whose children are only like 3 and they can work the phone. And I'm like, that's crazy how fast they have worked out a phone. And I'm thinking, but yet from a young age, really starts primary school from 5 all the way up to 12, there is no focus on digital literacy, digital education. They're going into schools, they're giving them the stranger danger talks, they're giving them how to make a safe password and then forgetting about it. And it's like, that's not enough. In this day and age, kids really need a comprehensive curriculum. And then the governments are coming out and they're like, let's teach the kids about AI. And it's like, well, wait a minute, you haven't even taught them the fundamentals of computing. And that's why we put the Kids in Cyber together, and we're building a platform with all the material on it for schools to cover passwords, but not just in a generic way. Like, it is built upon year on year. It goes more into authentication and types of authentication, not just this is a password, this is how to create one. And then we've got things like manipulation online, persuasive technology, deep fakes. I think if you teach children all these things from a really young age, they're going to be more analytical when they go online. They're going to be looking and they're going to be thinking and they're going to be analysing. And that'll have been built into them from such a young age, but they're not doing it. They're pushing in maths, they're pushing in English, and then they're giving them phones, and then they don't understand why kids don't know what they're doing online. And like you said, we're giving them adult spaces with absolutely no foundation, no context. It's just like, here you go.
I mean, I can definitely. My background used to be in cybersecurity and data protection, and I educate psychotherapists around, let's say, good technical hygiene. Okay, let's call it that. I mean, we are talking about the general public doesn't understand social engineering. The general public doesn't understand as a concept about data and what can happen to it. And what I do see, and I am going to kind of fight back in terms of education at the moment, is these teachers that I'm talking to, the teachers that I work with, they're overworked, they're underpaid, they are PHSE, this is this personal health, social, emotional teachers in topics that they're not always comfortable with or that they fully understand. Now they've got to be cybersecurity, cyber citizen, digital citizen. I mean, that's another problem with all of the names that we have for this. And a lot of the online safety industry isn't necessarily regulated, as many of the industries are not regulated. And children are learning to do this on their own, because certainly what I've found in the last 20, 25 years, certainly coming from the world of cyber and technology, is the parlance is confusing. Right. Okay. Social engineering is actually how cyber criminals get onto your computer, how they trick and manipulate you. But social engineering doesn't sound anything to do with technology. So people don't necessarily make those connections between the language and what it is we need to do. And unfortunately, we walked into this environment without stopping and questioning at any point. So let's just go back to MSN days. When you mentioned MSN earlier, I was like, oh yeah, with the nudges and the elliptical dots, in terms of you could tell who was okay with a keyboard and who wasn't. But actually, look at how email was integrated into households, and look at the way we talk about people. So if we go back that 20, 25, maybe 28 years, we're talking about the, in air quotes, boomer generation, who we now refer to really, really uneloquently as silver surfers. Okay. Like that cohort doesn't know what they're doing with technology. And I want to say to people, actually, where Silicon Valley emerged was from that cohort of people who put together the original internet, from which Silicon Valley emerged. So we do know what we're doing. It's just we haven't communicated it in a way that is helpful. We make things difficult. We have so many words to describe so many different things. For example, cyberbullying. Well, and I've written about this in my books, in terms of, well, what are we talking about when we talk about cyberbullying? Are we talking about doxing, stalking, adaptations of images, which can now take place in deep fakes? Many years ago, it used to be Photoshop. So as the technology changes, we're not keeping up with how we explain it to the general public, how we explain it to parents, how we explain it to children. And I think the education system is doing its absolute best at the moment. Sadly, it has bought into this idea that teachers are unable to communicate with children, that children are going off the rails, and therefore we need to ban the technology in schools. I'm watching at the moment that we've had the anxious generation attacking parents. Well, now it's the anxious process of attacking teachers and the education system and the education technology. And we live in a system, we live in a society, we live in a world where technology is there from the very moment you are born, from the stuff that's in the hospital that keeps children who are born prematurely alive, from televisions, from video on demand services, and we forget that the online space is all of this together.
Yeah. It's just, the thing is that it's just what's missing, and I suppose it's starting to be recognised now with the changes, with the 2028 changes that are going to be coming up, with the government saying that the schools need to get on better with digital literacy, because right now it's not really being taught in schools. I mean, I had a meeting with the Scottish Government, and they were saying that some schools are only teaching 5 hours of digital literacy per year. And it's like, that is so scary, because they interact with it so much. Like you said, it's all around them, but yet they don't understand it. And children are just becoming passive users and not thinking about technology as, and all the use cases it has, how to be creators in technology, and make things with it, in the world of possibilities that are out there. They're just being consumers and not learning. And I think that's one of the biggest concerns at the minute, especially for parents. They seem to be saying that, like, they don't know about it, but they just use it all the time.
And it's not so helpful when we have language that is accusatory. You know, children are cheating on their, not necessarily, because actually cheating would be where somebody might copy from somebody else because the CBA. There are reasons why children engage in certain behaviours. And again, this is where I think we've completely misunderstood the use of and interactions with technology and child development. And what I've seen is there's very little child development theory underpinning a lot of the decisions that we're making. It's an adult's assumption, an adult's accusation, an adult's reference back to what they think children are doing. And children's voices have been missing for a long time in this space. It's one of the reasons why I spend so much time doing my social media content, because actually the one thing that comes through repeatedly, and it has done for a long time, is I wish the teachers understood this. And what we haven't done is spent enough time with children to understand the worlds they're in or how they're using it. We are making adult-based assumptions, and then we retrospectively apply them to children. And that I actually saw in terms of that anxious generation approach about this is what children were doing and this is why they were doing it. And yet none of that is corroborated or supported with children's voices or longitudinal research. Again, and I'm going to quote something from my book here. When I first went to do my Managing Your Gaming and Social Media Habits, which is a British Psychological Society book that I did, I couldn't find a lot of research that was really robust and helped us understand what young people were doing online. Now, as a functional health practitioner, I spend a lot of time looking at, substances around food and their nutritional value. And I decided to do a bit of an experiment. And I typed in one of the chemicals from broccoli called sulforaphane. And in 2020, there was over 1,000 results that came back around sulforaphane. When I typed in anything to do with technology, and I used a lot of parameters. I typed in social media, I typed in Facebook, I typed in gaming, I typed in video games. It was around a ratio of 3 to 1 based on sulforaphane coming out the winner. We spend more time looking at the nutritional value of broccoli than we do what is taking place in the world of technology. And that's incredible.
That's definitely, you wouldn't believe that.
Well, I mean, as I said to, I think one of the lines I put in the book is, dear AI, which is obviously me right into the future of artificial general intelligence. We care more about broccoli than we do children's mental health at this point in time.
I can't actually believe how much AI has taken, how the boom has been over the past few years. It's been actually astounding. I mean, one of the things, looking back, I wanted to do was how I sort of got into the kids and cyber thing was my daughter can be pretty difficult to teach. She's quite difficult to engage. And I find that with a lot of the children now getting into schools and speaking with children, they are so consumed with so much information and everything's, like all singing and dancing and appealing to them that it's hard to really teach them really important concepts in a way that's fun. And that's how we develop the characters with the children in school so that because basically the approach of Kids in Cyber is vicarious learning. So the characters go through situations, they get themselves into predicaments, and it allows the children a way to look at it and say, I think that's a bad idea because rather than standing in front of them and giving them a lesson and saying, and we don't do this and we don't do that and this is why, and they're just kind of like, right. Because when I speak to my daughter, I notice if I tell her not to do something or I tell her about something that's wrong, she's not listening. She's so not paying attention. But if I say to her, for example, I'll say, Papa, I read something online. And she's like, oh, what did you read? And I'll say, well, I read about this scenario and I'll make it very child friendly for her. And she'll say, oh, that's not a good idea. And I'll be like, why do you not think that's a good idea though? And like, we'll talk about it back and forward. And I notice she comes to all the right conclusions on her own. But if I try to tell her about something, she just switches off and she doesn't listen. She finds it boring. And I noticed when I wanted to start teaching her about digital safety and all those things, I went to the bookshop and I was like, right, I'm going to get her a book. And then through storytelling, I can teach her some cyber concepts. There was nothing on the shelves. It was all rockets and space, coding in the computer section for kids, but that was about it. And that's what led me to write the first book, the Riley. It's a social engineering book, actually. It's called Riley and Her First Console. And she gets her first console for her birthday and she's gaming online and someone's asking her a lot of questions. And she gives away a bit too much information. And that's how we bring in the concept of social engineering and manipulation, but in a way that kids might actually come up against. And it's bringing those terms in early. But when I was in the bookshop the other day there, I was looking for a book for myself. And I thought, I'll go and have a look for some more books for my daughter. I've been actually looking for books about strong women leaders to try and get her excited about things like that. And I noticed the AI for kids books have started appearing on the shelves. Teach your children about AI and learn everything about AI. And I'm like, for all these years, there's never been a book in sort of digital literacy, cybersecurity, and all of a sudden it's all about AI. Teach your child AI, get your child into AI. And what does that even, I'm like, what does that even mean? Get your child into AI. And it's, I think everyone's getting hyped in the wrong thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've been controversial, provocative. I might as well just carry on with the same vein here in terms of actually this is also one of the things we've jumped on the shiny and new. Now, it is something we need to pay attention to because it is in the process of, and it is going to change the way we are in terms of culture, community, connection, communitas, the lot. But also, we've been using AI for a long time. Now, I am going to say there is a lot of fear, again, being driven by largely, don't buy your children teddy bears with AI in it. I'm just going to take people back to Tamagotchi. I'm going to take people back to Nintendogs. I'm going to take people back to the Furby. I'm going to take them back to Teddy Ruxpin. I'm going to take them back. We've been doing this for a long time. Okay. The thing about child development, and this is why I find it so fascinating that people are like focusing on the AI aspect and not on child development. If you are a child who is quite young, okay, so under the age of about 7, you have a brilliant active imagination. Okay, it's part of child development. Many children will speak to their teddy bears, will speak to their cars. They play with dolls' houses. I know, because that's what I do as a child therapist in play-based and creative work. We have metaphorical stories. And children can third person, and they will imagine, and they have, magical thinking about the way in which the world works. What's currently happening with a lot of the AI is the developers have decided to tap into being able to receive an answer from, one of these toys. What I'm noticing is we've mixed up and we've kind of gotten a little bit confused around what gamification is, what imagination is, and where meeting a child can occur through and with technology. I mean, I remember, and I'm sure that people will discuss this in terms of Toy Story. Andy, has a little cowboy, and that cowboy has a set of phrases that work on an operated mechanical system. Okay, you pull the string, it has a set of phrases. Those set of phrases would have been learned by Andy as a little boy, and he would have repeated those phrases and he would have interacted with those phrases, and then they would have bored him and he would have made his own up and he would have stopped pulling the string, right? What we can do with technology is we can tap into child development phases, and we need safeguards. We absolutely need safeguards to ensure that we are supporting that development, not interfering or redirecting. And this is where I think that the panic is occurring. Oh my goodness, AI is going to change the way that your child interacts with, and they're not going to learn how to speak to parents, and they won't be able to communicate with each other. Have we forgotten parents exist? Have we forgotten teachers exist? Have we forgotten siblings exist? And so on and so forth. If we focus on the humans, we stand much more of a chance of keeping that connective process and child development in place as it should be. Where we're at is, and I was going to say to you, it's a slightly tongue-in-cheek reflection here. You see, what you're doing with the children is you're gamifying education, and apparently that is a bad thing. And yet, go back to nursery schools and you'll see children clap along with the songs, gamification, the wheels on the bus go round and round, so that they learn the song and being in a community and working together with the nursery teacher and other children. And it helps children connect because the song is done in motherese, and all of that stuff has been happening for a long, long time. What about the child who doesn't have a parent who's capable of interacting that way? What about a parent who might be dealing with disabled children, who might be dealing with a blended family, who might be dealing with children in care, children with trauma, may not have the skills to communicate? We certainly know there's an increase and rise in communication and social difficulties, also known as autism spectrum disorder, which is increasing in terms of people who are now being diagnosed. We have a communication issue as humans, which we need to support firstly and foremostly before technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the gamification, children learn through play. I mean, it's something they've always learned through. I think the concern for AI in toys comes when some of the toys, because I did a bit of research into this just coming up to Christmas, and some of the toys are claiming they're AI, but it's not really true AI that's in the toy. Because like you can code and you can develop, and there's a difference between sort of algorithms and like a set of, you know, something that's been pre-coded and something that is truly intelligent and will learn from the child. And I think it's the little robots that are true AI that are learning from the child and communicating with the child and adapting its phrases is where parents sort of worry the most. And also, I think data is a big concern. You know, constantly interacting. Because these AI toys, and you know yourself with ChatGPT, it's always trying to keep you there longer. It always answers with a question at the end. Would you like me to summarize this? Would you like me to put this in bullet points? Would you like to explore this further? It's like keeping you engaged. And I think parents maybe wonder, I would as a parent, I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and my concern with AI robots and toys would be, is it going to keep the child playing longer than necessary? And then it becomes like the tablet, she won't get off it. And I'm like, get off your tablet, you've been playing too long, because she's playing more games and more videos. She's got like the little Amazon Kindle. That would be my concern. And also would be data. Like, what's she saying to it? What's she telling this little listening device about things in the house? And my daughter had this doll, and she would be like showing it around the house. She'd be giving it a house tour. You know, this is my room, and this is my bed, and this is and I would be concerned as a parent having robotic toys with cameras and AI that I would be like, wait a minute here. That would be my biggest concern with true AI toys.
So that is more to do with the lack of education for parents. And what I'm going to say here is, not every parent is interested. It sounds really like I'm attacking parents, and I want to really put this caveat here. Not all parents are interested in their child's development. Not all parents are interested in supporting their children in moral development, educational development, academic intelligence. Some parents are literally, and I mean this with the most compassion, are literally just trying to survive day to day. And sometimes the way in which they connect with their child is they will buy them something. They will say, here's my, let's call it love language, because that's quite a common term online and people might understand it. Here is the way I show you that I love you, because I do not have the capacity, I do not have the skills, or maybe there's lots of other reasons. I might not have the communication ability to sit with you and understand your world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy you the latest technology and I'm going to leave you to it. There are some parents who, and this is coming direct from the responses from TikTok and Instagram, okay? There are parents who say things like, well, my child wouldn't get groomed and I'd deal with it if it happened. And I think, okay, that's a parent who's having a real visceral response to some of the information out there. And that's because they're frightened. And this is what we haven't grasped the concept of. Parents are overwhelmed, never mind the children with the overload of information. Parents are overwhelmed. Parents don't necessarily understand this technology. They're being told they are wrong for getting their children technology. So they do what we all do in a trauma or stress response. They stop listening. And when you stop listening, you lose the ability to protect and safeguard children. This has happened in education, it's happened in social work, it's happened certainly in some of the safeguarding spaces, and it's definitely happened with parenting. If I just get rid of the technology, that will solve the problem, or I'm just going to give them the technology. And you're sitting in the space, us having this conversation is in the middle. We're wanting to talk about the technology and how we protect and safeguard and support children to become digitally literate. There are the outliers at the end, and those are the parents we need to be talking to. And unfortunately, they are parents who might be, I don't know, financially burdened. They might be time poor. They might be the ones who are so affluent that they perhaps buy their children something and leave the parenting to, for example, a nanny. There are people who like to outsource responsibility of parenting because parenting is the hardest job on the planet. There is no perfect way to parent, and you're going to screw it up, and there's going to be times when you don't meet your child's needs. And some people find that really difficult. If I'm not the perfect parent, then I'm not a good enough parent. And so they make cognitive choices around that. And that's really the other part of this developmental process. And sadly, over the last 18 months, I've seen mothers attacked more than anything in terms of, you gave them the technology, you failed them, it was your responsibility to protect your children. And so what's happening at the moment, and I'm going to quote my colleague's phrasing here, there is a lot of shame containment taking place in terms of how we now manage our role as a mother. And the way we do that is we either demonize the technology and get rid of it, or we just hand it over. And the issue is, Megan, is the children who have it handed over with no rail guards, no interaction, no connection going on around it, they're going to reach out to those systems. And those are the systems that are going to be attachment imitators. They're going to literally, as I put into my blog, they're going to take the soul of the child.
Mm-hmm.
Now that makes it sound really frightening, doesn't it?
This is one of the reasons why I wanted to tackle getting kids in cyber into schools, because parents feel like you're saying, and I think you put it perfectly when you said, when you give them too much information and when you bombard people, they just shut down and stop listening. And I think parents have got to a place where they're not listening. And there's a lot of parents at home that, will be very interested in their child's education. They'll sit and they'll do the maths, they'll do the English, they'll do the homework. And then you hear parents at the school gate that talk about homework and they say, I don't have time for that. Like, I'm so busy. I don't get home to 6, make dinner, washing, school clothes for tomorrow. I don't even look at homework. So they're not teaching they're not doing homework, they're not doing maths, they're not doing English, they're certainly not doing digital literacy, because a lot of parents themselves are not the most digitally literate, in a sense. I think schools are probably the best place to teach this. And I think that's why schools have to fill this gap. And alongside maths and alongside English, they have to teach children about navigating the online world, so that when you do go home and the parent says, here, you can have a phone, here, you can have a tablet, they have that education from school that's really going to help them. I mean, my daughter came home, the first time she asked me for a phone, she was 6. She came home and she said, Mum, can I have a phone? And I was like, absolutely not. And she was like, why? And I was like, well, first of all, who are you calling? She was like, well, no one. And I was like, okay, who are you going to text or send an email to? She's like, well, no one. I was like, so why do you need a phone? She's like, because my friends have one. I want to play games, want to watch videos. I was like, you have that Amazon. You do not require a phone. A phone's like an adult thing. She's like, but you've got a phone. And I was like, I use my phone for work, and I use it to call your gran, and I use it to arrange things in the family. It's not, you don't do those jobs, you don't need a phone. And she's like, well, my friend at school's got one. And I just did not believe it. I was like, 6-year-olds do not have phones. And then when I was speaking to that parent at the school gates, I was telling her the story. I was, my daughter was saying that, your little girl's got a phone. And she's like, oh, yeah, she does. And I was like, really? Like, why though? And she was like, well, there's games that she likes to play games in the car. And the Amazon requires an internet connection. She's like, so we got her a phone so that she could play games. And I was like, I fail to understand why parents are giving children mobile devices for games. And then they go on YouTube, and I don't even get me started on YouTube. YouTube, it has to be the worst platform for children. The videos that are on there, the games that are on there, the short form content is like some of the worst things I have ever seen.
Again, I'm going to joke here. That's all that quick dopamine, which is not a thing, by the way. You know, it's going back to that parent. I would be, and obviously I don't know much about the parent, but I would be sitting there thinking, okay, so that parent has maybe no idea or is too frightened to think about the risks that go with the technology. And that is a failure of society. And this is why I find that the government and kind of these moves to get rid of the technology really interesting. What I do see is, and actually I had this interaction recently on LinkedIn, was, well, we're the parents, we should just say no. Okay. What we do know is in research is when you put those barriers in place, is children will move into a rebellious space, or, and this can be hard for non-therapy people to understand, you can become so rebellious that you follow the rule to the letter, okay, in terms of what that does. But the resentment that sits behind that means that there is likely going to be a bleed out that will occur later on, which is generally why adults behave in the way that they do and they have their midlife crises, for example. But going back to that parent, what has happened there is this idea that a phone connects to the games. The phone does not connect to the digital city park. The phone does not connect to all of that. Hasn't been educated in a way that that parent can tolerate it. And this is why all of the work that I've done for, you know, the 15 years is helping, for example, the therapists, the social workers, the teachers understand we're not making this topic tolerable. What we are doing is pointing fingers. We are shame and blame. We are really not providing people with the education that they need because we don't understand it. And that's where I think we failed. Is 28 years ago, we could have made it mandatory within the schools that we did some work with the parents. We didn't. We frightened them with words like e-safety. We told them effectively, you need to come and do this because you're failing at being a parent. Well, what parent is voluntarily going to sit in a room knowing that that's what's being said in a ulterior transaction? If that's how they feel, why on earth would they come and work with the school? And then what we do is we buy into that fear by sending them letter after letter and warning after warning. And sadly, we have done this recently with a large how do I put this? So they are I'm not going to give them the notoriety, okay? Because one of the things that I'm watching at the minute is there is a large terrorist group that's being given notoriety because lots of people are talking about it on podcasts. And what that then does is that then makes that space more frightening. We absolutely terrify the pants off parents. And I'm going to say it again, in terms of nervous system regulation, parenting, being a child, anybody who is overwhelmed and stressed, they shut down, they stop listening, they don't learn. And that's effectively where the problem lies. And it has been for 20 plus years. And so when you're frightened of something, you want to put it in a cage. You want to bury it in the ground. You want to make it go away, because that's the only thing you can do psychologically as a parent to restore the feeling that you're doing something. And you were right to say this earlier. That is currently why we're doing what we're doing with all of these rules and processes. Is parents have been blamed, particularly that cohort of middle class women that have been, effectively pointed at in terms of, well, you should understand this space and you should have conversations and you should take this upon yourself to be activistic and you should. And of course, what parent wouldn't react to that? If you're having people tell you that you're failing, why would you not react? Why would you not do what you're doing? And so that mum that you were talking about that gave her child a phone is doing the best that she can with the information that she can tolerate and the information that she has.
There's so many movements at the moment with the ban in Australia, and then you have the ban smartphones in school. That's a big one. And then we have the delay smartphones. I think that's the three biggest, ones that are very, like, the harshest, I would say. And I think the ban smartphones in school, I mean, I do to an extent agree with that, because I think there should be a space that the children should go and they should learn and not have the distraction of being out in the playground, maybe people showing other people videos. Some people might be on more extreme side of things and say, if you look at that and think it's funny, I think the school should definitely be a safe space. I'm not sure about the delay smartphones. I think that is, I suppose, up to the parent. They're quite difficult to have a firm point of view on. I don't know if, like, you agree or disagree, or slightly in the middle.
On most of them, I would be saying there is something here about, okay, and I've talked about this in the Tech Smart Parenting book. When I walked with my children to school, you cannot protect them from everything that you will encounter in life. Okay, so one of the days I tell a story about one of the days we were walking to school, and there was a car accident where somebody was hurt, really hurt. And on that day, my children learned about road traffic collisions, paramedics, swearing, the helpers, the people who ignored and ran off, police turning up and wanting to take statements. It was incredibly interesting, but at the same time, if that was content that they were seeing online, they might have experienced that by themselves. The difference between looking at it online and what we were doing on that day is I could talk to them about the processes, what was happening. Okay, that's really scary. I was one of the sweary people. Yeah, that's really scary. Let mummy go and do this. Can you just stand there? Give me that, do this. Calling the police, calling the ambulance, looking at what was going on between people that were now frightened and shouting at each other, and so on and so on and so on. And we got to process it later on in the day, and we got to talk about it years and years later. And when my children saw the video, it was outside of school. So here's the thing. If we ban the phones in the school, they're still going to use them on the school bus. They're still going to use them on the way to and from school. Okay. We need to think about what is it that we're trying to do as a society. And if it comes to content, yes, there are major, major risks with the different types of content. And I haven't got time to go into that from my PhD. You can be cyber traumatized by that stuff. You can also be traumatized by seeing it in the real world. The likelihood of seeing different types of content online is higher because it's not regulated. And that is down to how we as a society think about computer ethics, cyber ethics, normal ethics, morals, journalism, news, etc., etc. It is now a world in which you can be exposed to other countries' rituals, procedures, cultures, behaviors, things that we used to read about in books, things that we would never see physically, we would have to imagine. And now we don't have to imagine, we can come across it. So where I see at the minute that there is a narrative around, oh, children are being shown these things in the school playground. Well, they were in 2010. They were in 2007. They were when the flip phones existed, way before the smartphone and iPhone. So the idea that it's this thing over here now is no different to that thing over there then. What we now have is a higher proliferation, in which case we need education about what to do, how to manage, and how to safeguard around where we are now. Not necessarily, let's try and make it all go away, because that is an impossible task. It isn't going to work.
And just to finish up, what would you say to parents that young children, particularly maybe primary age children, primary sevens, starting the academy soon, have asked for smartphones, iPads, I suppose technology that would be deemed for adults. They're starting to ask for that at Christmas, and they're thinking, okay, this is the time where parents maybe sometimes delay as well. They'll say in the beginning of the year, can I have a phone? Christmas, it's like such a delay. And now we're getting around there. Parents are starting to think, should I buy them a phone? Should I buy them the first, proper tablet, laptop?
So I am not going to attack anybody's parenting, right? Okay, what parents choose to do within their family is entirely up to them. The education aspect of this is, if you are going to buy your children technology in any way, shape or form, do your due diligence, go and have a look at some of the internet safety websites, have a look at the kinds of things you need to think about to protect your child, and use the systems that exist, parental controls. Maybe you want to limit how your child uses it. Have conversations about the technology. But here's the thing. Have a system that works for you and your family. I don't really care what anybody else's family is doing, right? That works for you and your family, where rules are not completely rigid. And the reason I say that is because we have times when we go to families, times when we're on holiday, times when we are in need of extra sleep for exams, for example. When you think about what you're doing for your children, it is always about with, it is always about alongside, and it is always about protection, particularly under the age of about 12, because that's really important in terms of child development. Again, also think about the kind of content you and your child will share or be exposed to, and think about outside your castle. And I use that phrase. You can be the most protective, tech savvy, educated parent at home. Your child is going to leave the house at some point and enter into other people's domains, public domains, into spaces where other people have devices. This is why the whole process of banning it won't work. Think about the conversations. And if you really, really want the be all and end all, okay, of anything to do with child protection and working with your children, it's conversations.
That's great. Thank you very much, Phil. Thank you for coming and speaking to me and explaining everything. It was really interesting, really in-depth, and I think there's a lot to take away from everything you said. I mean, even I've felt like I've learned a lot today, which is great. So thank you very much. I always like
You're
to learn.
welcome. I'm waiting for my LinkedIn score to go down now in terms of
Your LinkedIn what?
my LinkedIn, people like that, I'm not following her anymore. She's too provocative, yeah.
Not at all. I think people appreciate, honesty and just being really straight about where we are and the facts and not dancing around about things. I know I do. I mean, it's better than people saying, well, I don't know. And there is a lot of things out there, like you're saying about the ban. People are saying, yeah, it's great and do it, ban it, shut it down. And it's not helpful. It's not really helpful conversation to just, cut things off, because it's going to happen, and it's good to hear fresh voices that, like you're saying, you've got your PhD, 7 books, so many years working with so many people. It's great to hear your experience and all the knowledge that you have, which is great. But thank you very much. It was fantastic having you.
Thank you.
Thank you.